The crystal towers of Nexus Prime stretched into the dark void of space like frozen lightning. Inside the tallest spire, beings from across the galaxy gathered in the Grand Council chamber. The air hummed with tension as voices spoke in dozens of different languages. Translators worked overtime to keep up with the heated discussions. Speaker Zixandra floated at the center of the chamber. Her 4 arms moved gracefully as she tried to maintain order. As a member of the Pelagic Union, she was used to deep waters and calm currents. But today, the council felt more like a storm-tossed sea. "Order! Order!" she called out, her voice echoing through the vast chamber. "We must address the situation calmly." The situation was simple, yet troubling. For 3 standard galactic cycles, no one had heard from the humans. No trade ships, no diplomatic messages, no scientific exchanges. Nothing. The Sol system had gone completely silent. In the upper galleries, the younger species whispered among themselves. The insect-like Chitauri clicked their mandibles nervously. Perhaps they finally destroyed themselves, one said. "Humans are violent creatures. War is in their nature." The reptilian Saros nodded their scaled heads in agreement. "It was bound to happen eventually," their representative hissed. "They fight each other constantly. Civil war must have consumed them." But in the lower section reserved for elder races, the atmosphere was different. The crystalline vorti said nothing, their gem-like bodies refracting light in patterns that other species had learned meant deep concern. Beside them, the gas cloud beings known as the Nethys swirled uneasily in, their containment fields. These ancient races remembered things that younger species had forgotten. They remembered the last time humans had gone silent. It was during the Proxima incident 30 years ago. Pirates had been raiding trade routes near the human colony worlds. For months, human merchants and colonists had suffered attacks. Ships were destroyed, cargo stolen, people killed. The Galactic Council had debated what to do about the pirate problem for weeks. Then suddenly, the attacks stopped. All of them. At once. A single human ship had done it. Just one small corvette called the UES Hornet. It found the main pirate base, a massive asteroid fortress that housed over 50 ships and thousands of raiders. The pirates thought they were safe. They were wrong. The human ship didn't try to arrest the pirates. It didn't demand surrender. It simply began killing them. Every single one. The Hornet used tactics so brutal that they violated 17 different galactic warfare conventions. It turned the pirates' own defenses against them, used their stolen cargo as weapons, and left the survivors trapped in the vacuum of space. When rescue ships finally arrived, they found a graveyard. The pirate base was gone. The ships were scattered. Debris. And floating among the wreckage were emergency pods containing the few pirates who had lived long enough to send out distress calls. Their messages were all the same, terrified screams about humans being monsters. The galaxy had decided to leave the humans alone after that. Now Speaker Zixandra looked around the chamber, remembering those old reports. "We need to send a reconnaissance. Mission to Sol," she announced. "We must know what has happened to humanity." War leader Grakthos of the Scar Dominion stood up. His massive form towered over the other representatives. Bone spikes jutted from his arms and shoulders. His teeth, each as long as a human finger, gleamed in the chamber's light. "Why do we care about one small species?" he growled. "If they are dead, their worlds are free for the taking. The Scar were predators, apex hunters from a world where only the strongest survived. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire species. To them, the silence from Sol meant opportunity. "Because," said the Vortai representative, her crystal form chiming like distant bells, "humans are not like other species. When they go quiet, it usually means they are preparing for something." "Preparing for what?" asked the Chitauri ambassador, his antenna twitching nervously. The vorti, crystal pulsed with deep blue light. War. This caused an uproar in the chamber. Some species laughed, others argued. The Saros representative slammed his tail against the floor. Impossible! Humans barely have 50 ships. Even if they united their entire fleet, they could not threaten anyone. But the elder races exchanged looks. They knew something the younger species did not. They had studied human history. They knew about Earth's wars, about human tactics, about the way humans thought about conflict. Most species fought to win territory or resources. Humans fought to destroy their enemies completely. Speaker Zixandra raised all 4 arms for silence. The motion is made. We will send a reconnaissance fleet to the Sol system. Who volunteers? 12 species offered ships for the mission. They were all scientific vessels, not military ones. Everyone expected to find empty worlds, or maybe evidence of a plague or civil war. The ships would jump to the edge of the Sol system, take some readings, and report back. Captain Mordeth of the Catherian ship Truthseeker was chosen to lead the mission. The Catherians were explorers by nature, peaceful and curious. Their ships were fast and had excellent sensors. If anyone could figure out what happened to the humans, it would be them. As the council session ended, the various species began to disperse, but the elder races lingered. They gathered in a small group near the chamber's main exit. "Something is wrong," whispered the Nethys representative, his gaseous form shifting colors with anxiety. "The timing is too convenient. 3 cycles of silence, right after the trade disputes with the Outer Rim Coalition." The vorti's crystal form darkened. "You think they planned this?" "Humans do not simply disappear," replied an ancient machine consciousness from the collective. Its robotic voice carried the weight of millennia. "In all our observations, they respond to threats in one of 2 ways: immediate violence or careful preparation for overwhelming violence." The group fell silent. In the distance, they could hear war leader Grakthos boasting to his allies about how the Scar would claim human worlds once the reconnaissance mission confirmed their extinction. "Should we warn them?" asked the Nethys. The vorti's light pulsed, thoughtfully. "Warn them of what? We have no proof, only suspicion. And," added the collective's representative, "some lessons can only be learned through experience." 3 days later, the reconnaissance fleet departed Nexus Prime, 12 ships carrying the best scientists and explorers the galaxy had to offer. They would reach Sol in 2 weeks, take their readings, and return with answers. None of them expected those answers to change everything. As the ships disappeared into hyperspace, the elder races watched from Nexus Prime's observation decks. They had seen this before, in different forms across the galaxy's long history. A young species would grow confident, perhaps too confident. They would poke at something they did not understand, and then they would learn why some things should be left alone. The vorti representative turned to her companions. "How long do you think before we hear from them?" 2 weeks to reach Sol, calculated the collective. Perhaps a few days for investigation. Then we discover whether our fears were justified, finished the Nethys. In the depths of space, the reconnaissance fleet traveled toward humanity's home system. Behind them, the galaxy continued its normal business. Trade flowed along established routes. Diplomats made deals. Scientists made discoveries. None of them knew that in 18 days, everything would change. The humans had been silent for a reason, and the galaxy was about to discover what that reason was. The reconnaissance fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Immediately, every alarm on every ship began screaming. Captain Mordeth stared at his sensor displays in disbelief. His long, flexible fingers trembled as they worked the controls. The Catherian had explored hundreds of star systems in his lifetime. He had seen gas giants, asteroid fields, space storms, and stellar phenomena that defied explanation. But he had never seen anything like this. "Sensors report," he ordered, his usually calm voice cracking slightly. "Sir," his science officer replied, her own voice filled with awe and terror, "the asteroid belt is gone." "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "I mean it is not there anymore, sir. Where the asteroid belt should be, there is something else." Captain Mordeth looked at the main display screen. In the center of the image, where millions of rocks should have been orbiting the human sun, there was a single massive object. It was dark, angular, and absolutely enormous. "What are the dimensions?" he whispered. "Approximately 50 kilometers long, 12 kilometers wide, and 8 kilometers high," came the response. "Sir, that thing is larger than some moons." The object hung in space like a sleeping giant. Its hull was a nightmare of overlapping armor plates and weapon emplacements. Even at this distance, the ship's sensors could detect thousands of gun barrels pointing in every direction. The design was unmistakably human, but scaled up beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. "It's a battleship," said the tactical officer. "But that's impossible. No species builds ships that large. The resource requirements alone would bankrupt entire worlds." Captain Mordeth activated the communication system. Standard protocol required him to announce peaceful intentions when encountering unknown vessels. He hoped his voice would not betray his fear. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Mordeth of the Galactic Council ship Truthseeker. We come in peace and request permission to enter your system for scientific observation." For long minutes there was no response. The massive human ship simply hung in space, dark and silent. Then, without warning, it moved. The movement was subtle at first, a slight shift in orientation. Weapon systems that had been pointing in random directions suddenly focused on the reconnaissance fleet. Every ship in the fleet found itself targeted by enough firepower to level continents. Then came the demonstration. A section of the battleship's hull opened like a blooming flower. From the opening emerged a weapon unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was a massive cannon, easily 2 kilometers long, that began to glow with dangerous energy. "All ships, evasive maneuvers!" Captain Mordeth shouted. But the human weapon was not aimed at them. Instead, it targeted a large asteroid, roughly the size of Earth's moon, that was drifting nearby. The cannon fired once. The projectile that emerged was invisible to the naked eye, but the sensors tracked it easily. A tungsten rod no larger than a communications probe accelerated to 15% of light speed. When it struck the asteroid, the result was instantaneous and terrifying. The asteroid simply vanished. One moment it was there, a solid chunk of rock and metal that had existed for billions of years. The next moment it was gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and radiation. The energy release was equivalent to a stellar event. The flash was so bright that several ships had to shut down their optical sensors to prevent damage. The radiation pulse that followed knocked out communications on 3 vessels and caused temporary system failures across the entire fleet. As the glow faded, Captain Mordeth realized that his mouth was hanging open. Around him, his bridge. Crew sat in stunned silence. A few were praying to whatever gods their species worshipped. Then came the voice. It was calm, professional, and utterly human. The speaker could have been discussing the weather or requesting docking clearance, but the words themselves sent ice through the veins of every being in the reconnaissance fleet. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy, commanding officer of the UES Retribution. You have 30 minutes to retreat beyond the heliopause. This is your only warning." Captain Mordeth found his voice. "Admiral Chen, we are peaceful, explorers representing the Galactic Council. We mean no harm. We were simply concerned when we lost contact with humanity." "Your concern is noted," came the reply. "Your 30 minutes started when I began speaking. I suggest you use them wisely." "But, Admiral, surely we can discuss this." The Galactic Council wishes only to ensure that humanity is safe and well. There was a pause. When Admiral Chen spoke again, her voice carried a hint of amusement that was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. Captain, in the last 3 years, humanity has mined every asteroid in this system. We have built 18 ships like this one. We have weapons that can crack planets and defenses that span the entire solar system. We have prepared for every possible scenario, including the one where well-meaning explorers accidentally start a war by refusing to leave when asked politely. She paused again, and Captain Mordeth could almost hear her smile. You now have 28 minutes. The science officer was frantically working at her station. Sir, she whispered, deep scans are picking up additional signatures throughout the system. Large objects hiding in the shadow zones of planets and asteroid clusters. How many? Captain Mordeth asked, though he dreaded the answer. 17 more signatures, all approximately the same size as the first ship. The captain's legs gave out. He slumped into his command chair as the full implications hit him. 18 massive battleships, weapons that could destroy moons, a species that had spent 3 years preparing for war, and they had just threatened. These humans with a fleet of 12 unarmed science vessels. All ships, he broadcast to the fleet. Emergency jump to hyperspace. Now. Sir, his navigator asked, what are our coordinates? Anywhere but here, Captain Mordeth replied. Just get us out of this system before that woman decides we have overstayed our welcome. As the Truth Seeker's engines powered up for the jump to hyperspace, Captain Mordeth took one last look at the human battleship. In the distance, more shapes were becoming visible as they emerged from hiding. Each one was a monument to human engineering and their capacity for violence. The reconnaissance fleet escaped Sol system with 17 minutes to spare. As they jumped to hyperspace, carrying news that would shake the galaxy to its foundation, Admiral Chen watched them go from her command chair aboard the Retribution. Think they got the message? Asked her tactical officer. Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a particularly pleasant expression. Oh, I think they understand perfectly. The question is whether the rest of the galaxy will be smart enough to listen. Turned to her communications officer. Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them the demonstration was successful. The galaxy now knows we exist, and they know we are not defenseless. And if they decide to come back with warships instead of explorers? Admiral Chen's smile widened. Then we give them a proper demonstration of what 3 years of human engineering can accomplish. In the depths of space, the UES Retribution resumed its patrol. Around it, 17 other massive ships continued their silent watch over humanity's home system. They were ready for peace. They were prepared for war. And for the first time in galactic history, humanity had made sure that the choice between the two would be entirely up to everyone else. The reconnaissance fleet carried more than news back. To Nexus Prime, they carried recordings, sensor data, and the beginning of a new understanding. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not like other species. When humans went silent, it was not because they were weak. It was because they were getting ready. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from across the galaxy packed the crystal chambers of Nexus Prime. The usual diplomatic protocols were forgotten as species after species demanded to know what had happened in the Sol system. Speaker Zixandra struggled to maintain order as footage from the reconnaissance mission played on screens throughout the chamber. The image of the massive human battleship hung in the air like a bad dream. But worse than the ship itself was the recording of Admiral Chen's voice, calm and professional as she delivered humanity's ultimatum. This is clearly a hoax, declared Ambassador Felthok of the Rigelian Trade Consortium. His blue skin had turned pale with worry, but he still tried to maintain his composure. No species could build ships that large. The mathematics alone make it impossible. Captain Mordeth, still shaken from his encounter with the human fleet, stood to address the council. I was there, he said simply. I saw it with my own eyes. The humans have built something beyond our understanding of naval engineering. 18. Ships, whispered the representative from the Centauri Federation. How could they hide 18 battleships from our intelligence networks? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Velnara, the galaxy's leading expert on human psychology, stepped forward. She was a tall, thin being from the academic world of Scalaria Prime. Her species devoted their lives to studying other civilizations. Because, she said in her quiet voice, we never truly understood what humans are capable of when they feel threatened. The chamber fell silent. Dr. Velnara rarely spoke at council sessions, but when she did, others listened. For 30 years, we have treated humanity as a minor species, she continued. We have ignored their warnings about piracy. We have dismissed their requests for better trade agreements. We have made it clear that we consider them unimportant. She gestured to the image of the human battleship. This is their response. War leader Grakthos of the Scar Dominion laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound that echoed through the chamber. You speak as if these humans are a threat, he growled. 18 ships? My people have conquered entire sectors with smaller fleets. The war leader stood to his full height, his bone spikes gleaming in the chamber's light. Around him, his fellow Scar nodded their agreement. They were warriors born and bred, creatures who knew only strength and violence. I have studied the tactical reports, Grakthos continued. These human ships are large, yes, but size means nothing without the will to use it, and humans have proven themselves to be weak. They negotiate when they should fight. They show mercy to their enemies. They value the lives of individuals over the strength of their species. He pointed one massive claw at the screen showing the human ship. This is a bluff. They built these ships to frighten us, not to fight us. Send my war fleets to Sol, and I will bring you human prisoners to prove their weakness. The younger species in the council began to murmur agreement. The Scar were the galaxy's most successful conquerors. If they said the humans were weak, perhaps they were right. But the elder races remained silent. The Vortai representative pulsed with warning colors. The Nethys swirled uneasily in their containment fields, and the ancient collective's machine consciousness began running calculations that made its processors hum with concern. War leader, said the Vortai representative, her crystal voice ringing like a bell. Have you studied human military history? Grakthos snorted. I have read their wars. Humans fight with primitive weapons and crude tactics. They waste resources on protecting the weak instead of eliminating them. Their soldiers hesitate to kill when killing is necessary. And yet, the Vortai continued, they have never lost a war when their entire species was united. Because they have never faced a real enemy, Grakthos replied. They fight only each other. Soft creatures fighting other soft creatures. When they face true predators, they will break. Dr. Velnara stepped forward again. War leader, you misunderstand the recordings. Humans do not fight to conquer. They fight to survive. And when survival is at stake, they become something else entirely. She activated her personal display, showing data from human conflicts throughout their history. Every major human war has ended the same way: total victory or total defeat. They do not accept partial solutions when their existence is threatened. Propaganda, Grakthos dismissed. These are the fantasies of a weak species trying to appear strong. The debate continued for hours. Species after species stood to give their opinions. Some sided with the Scar, believing that humanity was bluffing. Others urged caution, suggesting diplomatic contact before any military action. The elder races voted for patience and further study, but they were outnumbered by younger, more aggressive civilizations who saw opportunity in humanity's apparent isolation. Finally, Speaker Zixandra called for a formal vote. The motion before us is clear. Do we respond to humanity's actions with military force, or do we attempt diplomatic solutions? The vote was closer than expected. but the military faction won. 12 species committed ships to a coalition fleet that would travel to Sol and demand humanity's surrender. The Scar would lead the expedition, supported by the Rigelian Navy, the Centauri battle groups, and 9 other military forces. War leader Grakthos stood triumphantly as the vote was announced. "We will assemble 800 ships for this mission. When the humans see our numbers, they will surrender without a fight. And if they choose to resist..." He bared his teeth in what his species considered a smile. "Then the galaxy will watch as the Scar Dominion adds another conquest to our collection." As the council session ended, representatives began filing out to prepare their fleets. But in a small chamber near the main hall, the elder races gathered for an emergency meeting. "They are making a terrible mistake," said the Nethys representative. "The coalition has no idea what they are walking into." The collective's machine consciousness ran another series of calculations. Based on human historical patterns and the capabilities demonstrated by the battleship, I estimate a 97% probability that the coalition fleet will suffer catastrophic losses. "Should we warn them?" asked the Vortai, the eldest. Among them, a representative of the primordial archive who rarely spoke finally broke his silence. "Some species must learn through experience. The humans have given fair warning. What happens next is the coalition's choice." 3 days later, the coalition fleet began assembling at Kepler Station, a massive military base on the galaxy's trade routes. 847 ships from 12 different species gathered in the largest military formation in recent history. The Scar contributed 300 vessels, including their feared Deathclaw fleet. The Rigelians brought their newest battlecruisers. The Centauri deployed their orbital bombardment specialists. Every ship was crewed by experienced warriors and equipped with the finest weapons their species could produce. War leader Grakthos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, and watched his armada take formation. He had conquered 43 worlds with smaller fleets. The humans would be his 44th. "Set course for Sol," he ordered. "It is time to teach these upstart humans their place in the galactic order." The coalition fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it the hopes and fears of half the galaxy. Some species watched the departure with excitement, eager to see humanity brought low. Others observed with growing dread, remembering old warnings about poking sleeping giants. On Nexus Prime, the elder races monitored the fleet's progress and prepared for the worst. They had tried to prevent this confrontation, but younger species rarely listened to wisdom. The Vortai representative pulsed with colors that meant deep sorrow. "How many do you think will return?" The collective calculated silently for several minutes. "If the humans show mercy, perhaps 200 ships will survive. If they do not..." The machine consciousness did not finish the sentence. It did not need to. In the depths of space, the coalition fleet raced towards Sol, confident in their superiority and eager for battle. Behind them, the galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen when unstoppable force met immovable object. None of them knew that in the Sol system, Admiral Sarah Chen was watching their approach on long-range sensors and smiling. The humans had spent 3 years preparing for exactly this moment. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between a species that conquered others and a species that had learned to conquer itself. The coalition fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with all the confidence of predators approaching wounded prey. 847 ships arranged themselves in a massive battle formation that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. War leader Grakthos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, and stared at the tactical displays with satisfaction. His fleet represented the combined military might of 12 civilizations. No force in galactic history had ever assembled this much firepower in one place. "Target analysis," he barked to his tactical officer. "Sir." We are detecting the large human vessel in the asteroid belt region, just as the reconnaissance reports indicated. No other major signatures visible. Grakthos bared his teeth in what his species considered a victory smile. 18 ships against 800. The humans chose poorly. But his smile faded as the tactical officer continued his report. Sir, I am detecting unusual readings throughout the system. Small objects moving in coordinated patterns. Thousands of them. Debris? Grakthos dismissed. Asteroid fragments. Focus on the main target. He opened a channel to the human vessel. Human ship, this is War Leader Grakthos of the Scar Dominion. You will surrender immediately and submit to Galactic authority. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. The response came not from Admiral Chen, but from a new voice. Male, calm, with a slight accent that the translation, systems identified as coming from Earth's northern continent. War Leader, this is Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb, Commander of the Sol Defense Force. Before we begin this engagement, I want to make sure you understand what you are facing. I face 18 primitive ships with a rabble of untrained humans. Grakthos growled. Surrender now, and some of you may survive as slaves. Admiral Webb chuckled. It was not a pleasant sound. War Leader, you are looking at our asteroid belt and seeing one ship. That is your first mistake. Our asteroid belt was not destroyed. It was converted. As if responding to his words, space around the Coalition fleet began to light up. What had appeared to be empty vacuum suddenly revealed itself to be anything but empty. Defense platforms that had been hiding in sensor shadows activated their power systems. Automated weapon clusters that had been drifting like space debris suddenly formed attack formations. Mining ships that had been invisible among the asteroid fragments revealed themselves to be heavily armed combat vessels. The Coalition fleet found itself surrounded by thousands of defensive installations, each one bristling with weapons that made their own armaments look primitive. Your second mistake, Admiral Webb continued, was assuming that humans build ships the way other species do. We do not build individual vessels. We build systems. The massive battleship UES Retribution began to move, but it was not alone. From hiding places throughout the solar system, 17 other massive ships revealed themselves. They had been concealed behind planets, hidden in the shadow zones of asteroid clusters, disguised as space stations orbiting the outer worlds. Each ship was as large as the Retribution. Each carried enough firepower to level entire continents, and all 18 were now moving to surround the Coalition fleet. War Leader Grakthos felt something he had not experienced in over 2 decades of warfare. Fear. This is impossible, he whispered. No species can hide fleets this size. Your third mistake, Admiral Webb said, his voice still maddeningly calm, was thinking that 3 years of human silence meant 3 years of human inactivity. We have not been idle, War Leader. We have been busy. The demonstration began with precision that spoke of months of careful planning. The humans did not attack randomly or with overwhelming force. Instead, they conducted what could only be described as a masterclass in tactical warfare. The first targets were the Coalition's communication ships. Kinetic projectiles fired from the hidden defense platforms struck with surgical precision, destroying sensor arrays and communication systems without damaging the ship's life support. Within minutes, the Coalition fleet was deaf and blind. Next came the command vessels, human weapons that fired concentrated energy beams cut through their shields like paper and systematically destroyed their weapon systems. The ships remained intact, their crews alive, but they were rendered completely helpless. War Leader Grakthos watched in horror as his mighty fleet was carved apart piece by piece. The humans did not seem interested in destroying ships quickly. Instead, they disabled them methodically, ensuring that their crews survived long enough to broadcast their terror. "Return fire!" he roared. "All ships, concentrate firepower on the nearest human vessel." The coalition ships that still had working weapons opened fire. Thousands of energy beams and projectiles streaked toward the UES Retribution. The display screens showed direct hits, weapons that should have breached any known armor. But when the light faded, the human ship was completely undamaged. Its shields had not even flickered. "Your fourth mistake," Admiral Webb announced, "was assuming that human defensive technology had not advanced along with our weapons. Our ships are protected by gravitational field generators that bend space itself around them. Your weapons are not hitting us. They are hitting empty space." The Scarfleet's Pride, the Deathclaw Squadron, attempted a coordinated attack on one of the human ships. 50 of the Dominion's finest vessels charged forward in perfect formation, their bone-white hulls gleaming as they prepared for ramming speed. They never reached their target. The human ship they were attacking opened what appeared to be a cargo bay. From the opening emerged not weapons, but something far worse. A cloud of microscopic machines spread through space like a silver mist. When the cloud touched the Scarships, their hulls simply began to dissolve. In minutes, 50 proud warships were reduced to empty frames drifting in space while their crews scrambled for escape pods. "Your fifth mistake," Admiral Webb continued, "was bringing biological crews to fight a species that has learned to weaponize matter itself." War Leader Grakthos found himself backing away from his own tactical displays as if the screens themselves were dangerous. Around him, his bridge crew was paralyzed with terror. This was not a battle. It was not even a slaughter. It was a demonstration of power so absolute that resistance seemed meaningless. "Please," he whispered into his communicator, "we surrender. Call off your weapons." "Surrender noted," Admiral Webb replied. "But the demonstration is not yet complete. You came here to learn about human capabilities. It would be rude of us not to provide a thorough education." The true horror began when the human ships revealed their planetary assault weapons. One of the battleships fired a single missile at a nearby asteroid. The missile did not explode on impact. Instead, it burrowed into the rock and activated something that turned the entire asteroid into a miniature star for exactly 10 seconds before allowing it to collapse back into normal matter. Another ship demonstrated its anti-fleet capabilities by firing a weapon that created a temporary black hole. The gravitational anomaly lasted only moments, but it was enough to tear apart an entire squadron of Rigelian cruisers. A third battleship showed off humanity's newest innovation, a weapon that could ignite gas giants into temporary stars. It targeted one of Sol's outer planets and fired a single beam. For 30 terrifying minutes, the Sol system had 2 suns before the reaction burned itself out and the planet returned to normal. "You wanted to know what 3 years of human engineering could accomplish," Admiral Webb said as the emergency sun faded back to a normal gas giant. "You are looking at it." Throughout the demonstration, the humans maintained perfect fire discipline. They destroyed weapons and engines while leaving life support systems intact. They disabled ships without killing crews. They showed that they could have annihilated the entire coalition fleet in minutes, but chose instead to let most of them live. It was a psychological warfare technique that was uniquely human, demonstrating overwhelming superiority while showing restraint. The message was clear. We could destroy you all, but we choose not to. Remember that the next time you think about threatening us. When the demonstration ended, less than 200 ships remained capable of hyperspace travel. The rest drifted, helplessly in space, their crews awaiting rescue from the very humans they had come to conquer. War Leader Grakthos sat in his command chair, staring at screens that showed the utter destruction of everything he had believed about warfare. His flagship was intact but powerless, kept alive only by human mercy. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen," came a familiar voice over the communication system. "War Leader Grakthos, you and your surviving vessels are free to return to your territories. Please inform the Galactic Council that humanity's terms for peaceful coexistence are simple. Leave us alone, and we will leave you alone. And if we do not? Grakthos asked, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Chen's response would be repeated in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. War leader, you have just seen what we built in 3 years when we thought we might need to defend ourselves. Imagine what we could build in 10 years if we decided we needed to defend ourselves from you specifically. The surviving coalition. Ships limped away from Sol carrying news that would reshape galactic politics forever. Behind them, 6 months after what galactic historians would later call the Sol demonstration, the galaxy had become a very different place. Trade routes that had operated for centuries were abandoned if they passed too close to human space. Diplomatic channels buzzed with nervous chatter about humanity's intentions. Military academies across dozens of worlds suddenly found themselves teaching courses on human tactical doctrine. The Grand Council chamber on Nexus Prime was quieter now. The aggressive posturing that had once characterized council sessions had given way to careful, measured discussions. Representatives who had once shouted demands now spoke in whispers. War leader Grakthos still attended council sessions, but he was a changed being. The massive Scar warrior who had once bragged about his conquests now sat quietly in the back rows. His bone spikes, once polished to gleaming perfection, were now dull and chipped. His eyes held a haunted quality that came from seeing the impossible, made real. When younger warriors from his own species asked him about the Sol system, he would only say, "Do not go there. Do not threaten them. Do not even mention their name unless you must." The official casualty reports from the Sol engagement told only part of the story. Yes, the coalition had lost over 600 ships. Yes, thousands of crew members had been killed or wounded. But the real damage was psychological. Every surviving member of the coalition fleet had returned home with the same message. Humans were not like other species. They did not fight for territory or resources or glory. They fought with a cold, calculated precision that turned warfare into a science. Captain Mordeth of the Truth Seeker had become something of a celebrity in academic circles. His first-hand account of meeting Admiral Chen was required reading in xenopsychology classes. Students studied his recordings, trying to understand how a single human voice could carry such quiet authority. She spoke to us like a teacher explaining basic mathematics to children, he would tell his audiences. There was no anger, no hatred, no desire for revenge, just a simple statement of fact. Humans had prepared for war, and anyone who wanted to test their preparations was welcome to try. Dr. Velnara published a series of papers on human psychology that became the foundation for new diplomatic protocols. Her central thesis was revolutionary for a galaxy that had always believed strength came from size, numbers, or natural predatory instincts. Humans, she wrote, derive their strength not from individual power, but from their ability to work together toward a common goal. When threatened, they do not react with individual violence like most predator species. Instead, they coordinate their entire civilization into a single, focused response. Her work explained how humanity had managed to convert an entire asteroid belt into a defensive network. It explained how they had built 18 massive battleships while maintaining complete operational security. Most importantly, it explained why attacking humanity would always be a losing proposition. Other species fight until they win or lose, Dr. Velnara concluded. Humans fight until the threat no longer exists. They do not stop at victory. They stop at the complete elimination of anything that might threaten them again. The economic effects of the Sol demonstration rippled through the galaxy. Several aggressive species found themselves suddenly cut off from trade partners who were nervous about being associated with potential enemies of humanity. The Scar Dominion, once the galaxy's most feared military power, discovered that other species were reluctant to sign defense contracts with them. Who wants an ally that might provoke the humans? asked Chancellor Veltrix of the Andorian Commerce Guild during a trade summit. Better to stay neutral and hope the humans remember that we minded our own business. The younger species that had supported the coalition found themselves facing internal political upheaval. Citizens who had cheered the prospect of teaching humanity a lesson now demanded to know why their leaders had nearly started a war with beings capable of turning planets into temporary stars. On the industrial world of Kepler Prime, massive protests forced the resignation of the entire planetary government. The new leadership's first official act was to send a formal apology to the Sol system, along with a treaty proposal that granted humanity complete autonomy in their region of space. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds as populations realized how close they had come to extinction. But it was the elder races who understood the true significance of what had happened. In a private meeting on the neutral world of Synthesis Station, representatives of the Vortai, Nethys Collective, and Primordial Archive gathered to discuss the new galactic order. "The humans have achieved something we thought impossible," said the Vortai representative, her crystal form pulsing with contemplative colors. "They have become an elder race without becoming ancient." The collective's machine consciousness hummed thoughtfully. "Our definition of elder races has always been based on age and accumulated wisdom. The humans have proven that there is another path, technological superiority combined with restraint." "They could have destroyed the coalition fleet completely," added the Nethys representative. "They chose not to. That choice makes them more dangerous than any weapon they demonstrated." The Primordial Archive's ancient representative spoke rarely, but when he did, others listened. "In all our observations of galactic history, we have seen species rise through conquest or commerce or technological advancement. The humans are the first to rise through reputation alone." It was true. Humanity had not conquered a single world outside their own system. They had not demanded tribute or territory or submission. They had simply demonstrated that they were prepared for anything the galaxy might throw at them, then politely asked to be left alone. And somehow, that had made them more influential than any conqueror in galactic history. The transformation was most visible in the way other species talked about conflict resolution. Diplomatic language that had once focused on military threats now emphasized peaceful solutions. The phrase, "we don't want to end up like the coalition fleet," became common in trade negotiations. Several species began developing their own versions of human defensive strategies. The Centauri Federation started converting asteroid fields into defensive networks. The Rigelian Trade Consortium invested heavily in automated defense systems. Everyone wanted their own version of humanity's demonstrated capabilities, but none of them succeeded. The elder races had studied the Sol demonstration extensively and reached an unsettling conclusion. Humanity's advantage was not just technological, it was cultural. Other species see warfare as extension of diplomacy, Dr. Velnara explained in her latest research. Humans see warfare as failure of diplomacy. This fundamental difference changes how they prepare for conflict. When other species built weapons, they built them to win battles. When humans built weapons, they built them to prevent wars from happening at all. It was this philosophy that made their demonstration so effective. Every weapon they had shown the coalition fleet was designed not just to destroy enemies, but to make enemies reconsider whether conflict was worth the cost. The greatest change came to the Galactic Council itself. The body that had once debated military action against humanity now found itself seeking human input on major decisions. Not because humans demanded it, but because their opinion carried weight that no one wanted to ignore. When the Outer Rim, colonies proposed a military expedition against pirates in the Vega sector, the Council's first question was not about resource allocation or tactical planning. It was, what would the humans think? The answer came 6 weeks later in the form of an official communication from the Sol system. Admiral Sarah Chen's voice, now familiar to every being in the galaxy, carried a simple message. The United Earth Navy has reviewed the situation in the Vega sector. We support the Coalition's anti-piracy efforts and wish them success in their endeavors. However, we feel obligated to point out that the current pirate leadership includes several former members of the Coalition fleet that attacked our system. The message continued with devastating politeness. We understand that unemployment among former military personnel can lead to career changes. Nevertheless, we wanted to ensure that the Coalition's anti-piracy efforts were conducted with full awareness of who they might encounter. The Outer Rim expedition found the Vega pirates already gone when they arrived. Intelligence suggested that the pirates had fled to uninhabited space after receiving Admiral Chen's message through back channels. No one asked how humanity had managed to send messages to pirates in a distant sector. No one questioned how they had identified former Coalition personnel among the raider crews. The message was clear. Humanity was watching, and humanity remembered. As the months passed, a new stability settled over the galaxy. Trade flourished along routes that avoided human space. Diplomatic disputes were resolved through negotiation, rather than force. Military buildups were abandoned in favor of defensive preparations. The Scar Dominion, once the galaxy's primary source of conflict, became an advocate for peaceful solutions. War leader Grakthos, when asked about this change in policy, would only say, "I have seen what happens when unstoppable force meets immovable object. I prefer negotiations." But it was Admiral Chen's final message to the galaxy that truly established the new order.